My name is Veronica. I am 58 years old. For 18 months, I kept a secret that would change everything. I have $53 million in my bank account, but I live like a poor disabled woman in a small old house. My future daughter-in-law never knew. She saw my cane, my worn clothes, my simple life, and she made her judgments. What she did not know was that I had a small recorder running in my pocket every single time we met. The night of my son's wedding, I finally let the truth speak for itself. Before I continue, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop a comment below and tell me your city or country. If you believe that sometimes silence is the most powerful weapon, hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel. You will not want to miss what happened when I finally revealed everything. Let me take you back to where this all began, because to understand what happened at that wedding, you need to know who I really am. For 25 years, I worked as a nurse at one of the biggest hospitals in Boston. I loved my job. I loved helping people holding their hands during their darkest moments, being there when families received news that changed their lives. It was hard work, the kind that breaks your body down slowly, but I never complained. I had a purpose, and that purpose kept me going. My marriage did not survive. When my son Derek was just 10 years old, I found out his father had been having an affair with a woman from his office. I still remember the night I discovered the truth. I came home early from a shift, and there were text messages on his phone that left no room for doubt. I did not scream. I did not throw things. I simply packed his bags and told him to leave. Derek was sleeping in his room, and I refused to let him hear his parents fight. After the divorce, it was just Derek and me in a small house on the outskirts of the city. We did not have much money. I picked up extra shifts whenever I could. Derek started working part-time when he was 16, bagging groceries after school to help with bills. I told him he did not have to, but he insisted. He said he wanted to take care of me the way I had always taken care of him. That boy has the kindest heart I have ever known. 8 years ago, everything changed again. I was driving home from a night shift when a truck ran a red light and hit my car. I do not remember the impact, only waking up in the hospital where I had spent so many years helping others. The doctors told me I had a spinal injury. I would walk again, but never the same way. I would need a cane for the rest of my life, and the chronic pain would be my constant companion. I had to retire early. Just like that, my career was over. I went from being a capable, independent woman to someone who struggled to climb stairs. The disability payments covered the basics, but there was nothing extra. Derek offered to move back home to help me, but I refused. He had just started his career as a software engineer, and I was not going to hold him back. Then 3 years ago, I received a phone call that I never expected. My Aunt Eleanor had passed away. Eleanor was my mother's younger sister, a woman who had never married and never had children. She had built a real estate empire in California, but she lived so quietly that most people did not even know she was wealthy. I had not seen her in years, just Christmas cards and occasional phone calls. I always thought she was comfortable, maybe upper middle class, but I had no idea about the true extent of her success. Her lawyer Margaret called me 2 weeks after the funeral. I remember sitting in my kitchen, holding the phone with trembling hands, as she explained that Eleanor had left her entire estate to me. The number she said did not make sense at first. I asked her to repeat it. $53 million. I thought there had been a mistake. I told Margaret to check again to make sure she had the right Veronica, but she assured me it was correct. Eleanor had left a letter for me which Margaret read over the phone. My aunt's words still echo in my mind today. She wrote that I was the only person in our family who had never asked her for money. She said she had watched me from a distance, admired how I raised Derek alone, how I worked so hard without complaining, how I never sought pity or handouts. She said I was the only one who deserved her fortune. I cried for an hour after that phone call. Then I made a decision that most people would think is crazy. I decided not to change anything. I kept the money in various accounts and investments, letting Margaret manage everything. I stayed in my small house with the creaky floors and the old furniture. I kept wearing the same clothes, driving the same car, living the same life. Derek did not know. Nobody knew except Margaret. Why did I do this? Because I had learned something important during my years as a nurse. I had seen what money does to people. I had watched families tear themselves apart over inheritances, seen children abandon parents, until they needed something witnessed relationships destroyed by greed. I wanted to know who truly loved me, for who I am, not for what I have. And then 18 months ago, Derek brought home a woman named Brittany. She was beautiful, I will give her that. 28 years old, working at a fashion company, always dressed in expensive clothes, with perfect makeup. Derek introduced her to me at my house, his eyes shining with the kind of love that made my heart ache with both happiness and worry. I noticed the way Brittany looked around my home. Her eyes swept across the worn carpet, the old television, the furniture that had seen better days. There was a flicker of something in her expression. Disappointment, maybe, or judgment. It was there and gone in a second, but I caught it. When she saw me walk with my cane, her smile tightened just slightly. She was polite, of course. She said all the right things, but there was a distance in her eyes, a coolness that told me she had already made up her mind about me. Derek told me that night that Brittany was the woman he wanted to marry. He said she was everything he had ever dreamed of. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust that my son had found someone who would love him the way he deserved to be loved. So I smiled and told him I was happy for him. But deep inside, a mother's instinct was whispering that something was wrong, and I decided to wait, to watch, to let time reveal the truth. A month after that first meeting, Derek invited me to have dinner at their apartment. They had been living together for a few months by then, and Brittany had decorated the place beautifully. Everything was expensive and tasteful, the kind of home you see in magazines. I arrived with a bottle of wine and a homemade apple pie, things I had always brought when visiting. Brittany opened the door with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. She took the wine, but barely glanced at the pie. The apartment was stunning. Modern furniture, abstract art on the walls, a kitchen that looked like it had never been used for actual cooking. Brittany had clearly put her stamp on everything. When I offered to help in the kitchen, Brittany's response stung more than I expected. I said I could chop vegetables or set the table, anything to be useful. She looked at me with a polite but dismissive expression and said that was not necessary. I heard her mutter something to Derek when she thought I was out of earshot. She said that I walked so slowly, I would just get in the way. She actually used those words. Get in the way. Derek did not defend me. He just gave a nervous laugh and changed the subject. During dinner, Brittany dominated the conversation. She asked Derek about his projects at work, about potential promotions, about how much his bonus might be this year. She wanted to know about stock options, about the company's growth, about where he saw himself in 5 years financially. Every question had a dollar sign attached to it. Not once did she ask me about my life. Not once did she inquire about my health, my days, my interests. When I tried to share a story from my nursing years, she actually yawned and checked her phone. She did not even try to hide it. After dinner, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Halfway there, I realized I had left my handkerchief at the table. I turned back to get it and stopped just outside the kitchen when I heard voices. Brittany was speaking to Derek in that casual tone people use when they think no one is listening. She said she did not understand why I still lived in that old house. She called it depressing. She said it was embarrassing that when they got married, she did not want to explain to her friends why her mother-in-law lived like that. Derek tried to defend me. He said I liked my home, that it held memories for me. But his voice was weak, uncertain. Brittany cut him off. She said she hoped I would at least dress better for the wedding, that she did not want photographs ruined by my appearance. I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding, my hand gripping the wall for support. I had suspected that Brittany looked down on me, but hearing it confirmed was different. It was like a knife slipping between my ribs. I did not confront them. I simply walked back to my seat, as if I had heard nothing. I finished my coffee, thanked them for dinner, and drove home in silence. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, for a long time, staring at nothing. My friend Patricia had always told me I was too sensitive, that I imagined slights where there were none. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was overreacting. But when I called Patricia the next day and told her what happened, she did not dismiss my concerns. Instead, she suggested something that would change everything. She asked why I did not record these conversations. She said if Brittany was really saying these things, I needed proof. Otherwise, Derek would never believe me. He was too deep in love to see clearly. At first, I resisted the idea. It felt wrong, invasive. But then I remembered Brittany's words about my house, my appearance, my disability. I remembered the look in her eyes when she saw my cane. I went to an electronics store that weekend and bought a small digital recorder. It fit perfectly in the pocket of my cardigan. The salesperson showed me how to use it, how to turn it on discreetly. I felt like a spy in some ridiculous movie. But as I drove home with that recorder in my purse, I made a promise to myself. I would gather the truth, whatever it was. And when the time was right, I would let my son see it for himself. The recorder became my silent companion over the following months. Every time I saw Brittany, it was running in my pocket. I did not know what I would find, or if I would find anything at all. Part of me hoped I was wrong about her. I was not wrong. 6 months after Derek and Brittany got engaged, both families gathered for a formal dinner. This was the first time I would meet Brittany's parents, Carl and Sandra. They owned a furniture store and lived in a nice suburban neighborhood. Comfortable middle-class, respectable people. The dinner was at an upscale restaurant that Brittany had chosen. When I arrived wearing my best dress, a simple navy blue that I had owned for years, I could see Brittany's expression tighten with disapproval. Carl and Sandra were pleasant enough. They shook my hand, asked polite questions about the weather and traffic. But I noticed how they looked at me, at my cane, at my modest appearance. There was a careful distance in their friendliness. Then came the introductions. Brittany stood up to formally introduce her parents to everyone. She spoke about them with glowing pride. She mentioned her father's business success, her mother's career in banking before retirement, their beautiful home, their recent vacation to Italy. Every word was designed to impress. When it was time to introduce me, Brittany's tone changed completely. She gestured toward me and said simply that I was Derek's mother. She added that I had been injured and could not work anymore. That was it. No mention of my 25 years as a nurse. No mention of how I raised Derek alone. Nothing that suggested I was anything more than a burden. Carl asked Derek if he was financially prepared to support his mother in the long term. He asked it casually, like he was inquiring about the weather, but the implication was clear. I was a liability, a problem that came with marrying Derek. Sandra looked at me with what she probably thought was sympathy. It felt more like pity, the kind you give to stray animals. I sat through that dinner with my hands folded in my lap, my recorder capturing every word. I smiled when appropriate. I answered questions briefly. I did not defend myself or correct any impressions. I wanted them to show me exactly who they were. And they did. After dinner, when we were all saying goodbye, I overheard Sandra whisper to Carl that it was such a shame Derek was burdened with a mother like that. She said Brittany deserved better in-laws. Carl agreed. He said at least Derek made good money, so Brittany would not suffer. I pretended not to hear. I hugged Derek goodbye, told him I loved him, and drove home with the recorder, heavy in my pocket. During the year of the engagement, Brittany visited my house exactly 3 times. Each visit left me with new wounds to add to my collection. The first time she complained about the heat. I did not have the air conditioning running because I had spent decades being careful with electricity bills. Old habits die hard, even with $53 million in the bank. Brittany fanned herself dramatically and asked how anyone could live like this. The second time she refused to sit on my sofa. She said she was wearing expensive white pants and did not want to risk staining them. She stood the entire visit, checking her phone constantly, clearly counting the minutes until she could leave. The third time was the worst. Brittany was looking at her phone while sitting at my kitchen table. I walked behind her to get some tea, and I saw her screen. She had taken photos of my living room and was texting them to someone. The message above the photos said this was her future mother-in-law's house, followed by laughing emojis and the word disaster. I did not say anything. I poured the tea, asked if she wanted sugar, and continued the conversation as if I had seen nothing. But inside, something hardened. The hope I had been clinging to, the hope that maybe Brittany would change or that I had misjudged her, finally died. A few weeks later, I tried one last time to talk to Derek. I did not show him any evidence. I did not play the recordings. I simply asked him if he was certain about marrying Brittany. I asked if he believed she loved him for who he was, not for what he could provide. Derek's response broke my heart. He told me I did not understand Brittany. He said she was just straightforward, that she spoke her mind. He assured me that she loved him deeply. I asked him one more question. I asked if he thought Brittany would still want to marry him if he lost his job tomorrow, if they had to live in a small apartment, if money became tight. Derek hesitated. Just for a second, but I saw it. A flicker of doubt crossed his face before he pushed it away. He said, of course she would. He said I was worrying too much. I did not push further. I hugged my son and told him I would support whatever decision he made, but I knew then that words alone would never convince him. He needed to see the truth with his own eyes, and I was prepared to show him when the time was right. The wedding was scheduled for a beautiful June evening at one of the most prestigious hotels in Boston. Brittany had planned everything down to the smallest detail. The guest list included over 200 people, mostly from her side. The flowers alone cost more than my car. I was not involved in any of the planning. Not once did Brittany ask for my opinion on anything. When I offered to help with the seating arrangements or the decorations, she smiled politely and said everything was under control. Derek apologized privately, saying Brittany was stressed and particular about these things. I received my wedding invitation 3 weeks before the event. 3 weeks. Later I learned that some of Brittany's co-workers had received theirs 2 months in advance. I was an afterthought in my own son's wedding. On the day of the wedding, I put on the nicest dress I owned. It was elegant, but understated a deep burgundy that I had bought years ago for a hospital gala. I did my hair and makeup carefully. I wanted to look my best, not to impress anyone, but for Derek. This was supposed to be one of the happiest days of his life. When I arrived at the venue, the contrast between me and the other guests was immediately apparent. Women in designer gowns and expensive jewelry, men in tailored suits, and then there was me with my cane and my old dress and my simple pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother. Brittany saw me in the lobby. Her eyes traveled from my hair to my shoes, and I watched her expression shift through several emotions. Surprise that I had made an effort, disappointment that the effort had not been enough, and something else, something that looked almost like contempt. She did not say anything directly to me. She just nodded and walked away to greet more important guests. When I found my assigned seat, I understood exactly where I stood in Brittany's world. I was placed at a table near the back of the room, close to the doors where the catering staff came and went. The other people at my table were distant relatives, and plus ones who did not know anyone else. It was the reject table, and everyone knew it. Derek was busy with photographs and last-minute preparations. I did not want to bother him with complaints about seating arrangements on his wedding day. So I sat down, placed my purse on the table, and made sure my recorder was running. The cocktail hour began, and I found myself standing alone in a corner of the reception hall. I watched the other guests mingle, laugh, clink glasses of champagne. I did not know most of these people. They were Brittany's world, not mine. Then I heard voices approaching. Brittany was walking toward my direction with a group of her friends. They were all beautiful, all dressed in stunning outfits, all radiating the confidence that comes with money and social status. One of her friends gestured toward me and asked who that woman was, the one standing alone by the wall. Brittany's response came clearly loud enough for me to hear every word. She said that was her mother-in-law. She laughed and added that I was poor and disabled. She said Derek had to take care of me, that I was basically a burden he was stuck with. She told her friends that I had nothing, no money, no assets, nothing to contribute. Her friends exchanged glances and giggled. One of them said it was too bad for Derek having to support his mother when he should be building his own life. Another commented that at least I would not be around forever, and then they all laughed again. I stood there holding my glass of water, listening to every word. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. The recorder was running. Every cruel syllable was being preserved. Brittany continued. She said the worst part was that I had nothing to leave behind. No inheritance, no property worth anything, just that sad little house. She said Derek would probably have to pay for my funeral someday, and she hoped it would not cost too much. More laughter, more casual cruelty. I waited until they walked away before I moved. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to walk steadily toward the exit. I needed air. I needed to think. Outside, the evening was warm and clear. I stood on the terrace looking at the city lights, trying to process what I had just heard. This woman was about to become my son's wife. She had just called me poor disabled, a burden worthless. She had mocked the idea of my funeral to her friends. I took out my phone and called Margaret. My voice was calm when she answered. I told her I needed her to send me the documents proving my inheritance. I needed them sent to my email within the hour. I also asked her to prepare a summary, something simple, that would show the total value of my assets. Margaret asked if everything was all right. I told her it would be. After I hung up, I stood on that terrace for a few more minutes, watching the stars begin to appear. Then I walked back inside, sat down at my table near the kitchen doors, and waited. The ceremony was beautiful. Derek looked handsome and nervous. Brittany looked radiant and triumphant. They exchanged vows, exchanged rings, kissed while the crowd applauded. I clapped along with everyone else, my face arranged in an expression of maternal joy. But inside, I was counting down the minutes until the reception speeches. The dinner was served. Toasts were made. Carl stood up and gave a long speech about how proud he was of his daughter, how she had found a wonderful man who could provide for her the way she deserved. The emphasis on provide did not escape my notice. Brittany gave her own speech, thanking everyone who had made the wedding possible. She named her wedding planner, her florist, her dress designer, her bridesmaids. She thanked her parents extensively. She did not mention me once. Then the microphone was offered to family members who wanted to say a few words. Several of Brittany's relatives spoke. Derek's best friend gave a funny, touching speech about their friendship. Finally, the MC announced that the mother of the groom would like to say something. I saw Brittany's face tighten. She clearly had not expected me to speak. She leaned over and whispered something to Derek, probably trying to stop it, but it was too late. The MC was already gesturing for me to come forward. I picked up my cane and walked slowly to the front of the room. Every step felt deliberate, purposeful. 200 pairs of eyes watched me make my way to the microphone. I began speaking softly, warmly. I talked about Derek as a baby, as a little boy who always wanted to help others. I talked about raising him alone, about the pride I felt watching him grow into a good man. My voice was steady. My words were loving. A few guests dabbed at their eyes. Then I paused. I said I had a special gift for the bride, something I had been saving for the right moment. I reached into my purse and pulled out the small digital recorder. I held it up so everyone could see. I explained that over the past 18 months, I had recorded many conversations with my new daughter-in-law. I said I wanted to share some of them with the guests so they could understand exactly what kind of woman my son had married. The room went silent. Brittany's face drained of color. I pressed play. The first recording was from the dinner at their apartment, Brittany saying I would just get in the way because of how slowly I walked. The second was from the family dinner, Carl asking if Derek could financially support his burden of a mother. The third was from earlier that evening, Brittany telling her friends that I was poor, disabled, worthless, and that she hoped my funeral would not cost too much. Each recording played clearly through the venue's sound system. The words echoed off the walls. Guests gasped, whispered, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Brittany jumped to her feet, screaming that this was illegal, that I was crazy, that I was ruining her wedding. I waited until she finished. Then I spoke again. I said there was one more thing the bride should know about her worthless mother-in-law. I pulled out the documents Margaret had emailed me, the summary of my assets. I held them up and announced to the room that the poor disabled woman Brittany had been mocking for 18 months had $53 million in the bank. The silence that followed was absolute. I placed the documents on the head table in front of Brittany. I looked directly into her eyes. I told her that she would never see a single penny of that money. Not ever. Then I turned and walked back to my seat, leaving chaos behind me. The moments after my revelation were something I will never forget. The wedding reception transformed into complete pandemonium. Guests were talking loudly, some standing up to get a better view of the head table. Phones came out everywhere as people recorded the drama or texted friends who had not been invited. Brittany was screaming, not crying, not apologizing, but screaming. She called me insane. She called me a liar. She demanded that Derek do something, fix this, make it stop. Carl and Sandra stood frozen, their faces masks of shock and confusion. Just hours ago, they had been so confident in their assessment of me. Now they were watching their carefully constructed world crumble. Derek sat motionless in his chair, staring at the documents I had left on the table. I watched him pick them up, read through them slowly, and then read them again. The color drained from his face as the reality sank in. Brittany grabbed his arm and shook him. She demanded to know if he had known about this. Had he been hiding his mother's wealth from her this whole time? Was this some kind of trick? Derek shook his head. His voice was barely audible when he said he had no idea. He looked at me across the room, and in his eyes I saw a mixture of confusion, hurt, and something that looked almost like relief. I did not move from my seat. I sat quietly while the storm raged around me. Eventually, Brittany's anger turned to desperation. She started crying real tears this time. She grabbed Derek's hands and told him this was all a misunderstanding. She said she loved him. She said she had never meant those things about me, that she was just joking with her friends, that it did not mean anything. Derek pulled his hands away. He asked her one question. He asked if she had really said she hoped my funeral would not cost too much. Brittany hesitated. That hesitation was all the answer he needed. Derek stood up from the table. He told Brittany he needed some air. He needed to talk to his mother. Brittany tried to follow, but Derek stopped her. His voice was firm when he said he needed to do this alone. We found a quiet room off the main hall, a small sitting area with leather chairs and soft lighting. Derek closed the door behind us, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he asked me why I had never told him about the money. I explained everything. I told him about Aunt Eleanor, about the inheritance, about my decision to keep living simply. I told him I wanted to know who loved me, for me, not for what I had. Derek listened without interrupting. His eyes were wet, but he did not cry. I pulled out the recorder again and played him more conversations, the ones from Brittany's visits to my house, the one where she texted photos of my living room and called it a disaster, the one where she told her mother I was an embarrassment. Each recording was another blow. I watched my son's face as the woman he loved was revealed to be someone entirely different from who he believed her to be. When the recordings finished, Derek sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he spoke. He apologized to me. He said he had been blind. He said he had wanted so badly to believe in love that he had ignored every warning sign. I took his hand and told him he had nothing to apologize for. I told him that love makes us vulnerable, makes us want to see the best in people. There was no shame in that. Derek asked what he should do now. I told him that was his decision to make. I said I would support him whatever he chose, but I also said that I had raised him to know the difference between love and possession, between a partner and a parasite. Derek nodded slowly. Then he hugged me tighter than he had in years. We walked back to the reception together. The room had not calmed down. Guests were still buzzing with gossip. Brittany was surrounded by her family mascara running down her cheeks, looking desperately toward the door. Derek walked up to her. The room fell silent, everyone waiting to see what would happen. Brittany immediately started talking words tumbling over each other as she tried to explain, justify, apologize. She said she loved him. She said the money did not matter. She said they could work through this. Derek listened to her for about 30 seconds. Then he held up his hand to stop her. He told her he needed time to think. He said he could not pretend that what he had heard tonight did not matter. He said the woman who had mocked his mother, who had been cruel and dismissive and calculating, was not the woman he thought he was marrying. Brittany tried to touch him. He stepped back. He told her he was leaving. He said his lawyer would be in touch. Then he turned and walked away from his own wedding reception, and I walked beside him. That night, Derek slept on my couch for the first time since he was a teenager. Neither of us talked much. I made him tea and sat with him in the quiet of my small living room. At some point, he fell asleep, and I covered him with a blanket. I sat by the window for a long time, watching the moon move across the sky. The wedding that was supposed to be the happiest day of my son's life had become something else entirely. I did not feel triumphant. I felt sad. But I also knew deep in my bones that I had done the right thing. Better a painful truth now than a lifetime of deception later. The weeks following the wedding were complicated and painful, but also clarifying. Derek filed for an annulment. Given the circumstances and the short duration of the marriage, his lawyer was confident it would be granted. Brittany initially resisted, but when she realized that fighting would only prolong her public humiliation, she agreed to cooperate. She tried to contact me several times. First came the apologetic messages filled with words about misunderstandings and regrets. She said she had never meant any of those things, that she had been nervous about joining a new family, that her words had been taken out of context. I did not respond. When apologies did not work, she changed tactics. She threatened to sue me for recording her without consent. Her father helped her find a lawyer who sent me an intimidating letter about privacy violations. Margaret handled everything. She pointed out that the laws around recording in Massachusetts were more nuanced than Brittany's lawyer seemed to understand, especially when the recordings were made in the context of protecting someone from fraud or emotional abuse. More importantly, she noted that any lawsuit would require Brittany to publicly admit to everything she had said, which would only add to her embarrassment. The threats quietly disappeared. Without the legal leverage, Brittany had nothing left. The story had spread through social circles and onto local social media. Someone at the wedding had recorded parts of my speech, and the aftermath and clips were shared widely. Brittany became known as the gold digger bride, and her reputation in certain circles was destroyed. She lost her job at the fashion company within a month. Her employer said it was unrelated, just corporate restructuring, but everyone knew the truth. In an industry built on image and relationships, being exposed as cruel and calculating was fatal. I did not celebrate her downfall. I took no pleasure in her suffering, but I also felt no obligation to help her. She had made her choices, and consequences followed. Derek spent a lot of time with me during those months. We had conversations we should have had years ago. He asked about my life before he was born, about my marriage to his father, about the struggles I had faced raising him alone. I told him things I had never shared before. The nights I worked double shifts and came home so tired I could barely stand. The times I skipped meals so he could have new shoes for school. The fear I felt when he got sick, and I did not have enough in savings to cover the medical bills. Derek cried when he heard these stories. He said he had always known we did not have much money growing up, but he had never understood just how hard I had worked to give him a good life. I told him that was exactly what I had wanted. I never wanted him to feel guilty or burdened. I just wanted him to have the chances I never did. He asked again about the inheritance. He wanted to know why I had not used it to make my life easier, to buy a nicer house, or take trips, or do all the things I had denied myself for decades. I tried to explain. I told him that money had never been what I valued most. Security, yes. Comfort, yes. But not wealth for its own sake. The money sat in accounts and investments because I genuinely did not need it to be happy. I had my health more or less. I had my home. I had him. What else mattered? Derek shook his head in wonder. He said most people would have changed their entire lives with that kind of money. I told him I was not most people, and I said that I hoped when the time came he would remember that lesson. As the months passed, I did start making some changes. Not dramatic ones, but meaningful. I hired contractors to renovate my house, not because I was ashamed of it, but because I was getting older and deserved to be comfortable. I added proper insulation, fixed the leaky roof, installed a new bathroom that was easier for me to navigate with my disability. I also set up a scholarship fund at the hospital, where I had worked for so many years. It would help young people from working-class backgrounds become nurses, the same career that had given me purpose and dignity for a quarter century. I asked that the fund be named after Aunt Eleanor, the woman whose generosity had made it all possible. Derek started dating again, cautiously. About 6 months after the annulment was finalized, he introduced me to someone new. Her name was Teresa, and she was an elementary school teacher. She was not glamorous like Brittany. She drove an old Honda and wore simple clothes and laughed easily at small things. When Derek brought her to my house for the first time, I watched her reaction carefully. She looked around my living room at the modest furniture and family photos and the books stacked everywhere. She told me my home felt warm. She said she could tell it was a place where love lived. I knew then that I did not need my recorder anymore. A year has passed since that wedding night. I think about it sometimes, especially in quiet moments when I am sitting in my garden or walking slowly through my neighborhood. I do not regret what I did. I know some people might think I was cruel, that I humiliated a young woman on what should have been the happiest day of her life, but I have made peace with my choices. The truth is, I did not humiliate Brittany. I simply allowed her own words to speak for themselves. Every cruel thing that played through those speakers was something she had actually said. I did not invent anything or exaggerate anything. I just held up a mirror. And yes, the timing was dramatic. I could have spoken to Derek privately, played the recordings for him alone, given him a chance to end things quietly. But I had tried that approach. I had tried gentle hints and concerned questions. He had not listened because he did not want to listen. He needed to be shocked out of his denial, and so did everyone else who had bought into Brittany's polished facade. More importantly, I needed to stand up for myself. For 18 months, I had endured mockery and contempt in silence. I had been called poor and disabled and worthless by someone who should have treated me with basic human respect. I had the right to defend my dignity, and I exercised that right. The money was never the point. I would have been exactly the same person with or without $53 million. The inheritance was just a tool, a way to expose the difference between appearance and reality. Brittany saw a struggling old woman with a cane and assumed she knew everything about me. She was wrong. I think about Derek often. He is doing well now. He and Teresa are talking about moving in together. She comes to dinner at my house regularly, and we have become genuinely fond of each other. She asks about my nursing days, listens to my stories, helps me tend my garden. She treats me like family, not like a burden to be tolerated. Derek has also started volunteering at a local charity, helping underprivileged families access housing assistance. He says it reminds him of what really matters. I like to think that watching his mother live, simply despite having every reason not to taught him something about values. As for Brittany, I have heard she moved to another city. A fresh start somewhere, people do not know her story. I hope she finds happiness genuinely. I hope she learns from what happened and becomes a better person. But I also know that is her journey, not mine. I have forgiven her in my heart, which means I no longer carry anger or resentment. But forgiveness does not mean I will ever let her back into my life. I have learned so much from this experience. I have learned that silence can be powerful when used strategically. I have learned that the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than comfortable lies. I have learned that protecting someone you love sometimes means letting them face hard realities. Most of all, I have learned that my worth was never determined by my bank account, or my disability, or the size of my house. I am valuable because of who I am, how I treat people, and the love I have given throughout my life. Anyone who cannot see that does not deserve a place in my world. If you are watching this and you have ever been judged unfairly dismissed because of your appearance or circumstances, made to feel small by people who think they are better than you, I want you to know something. You are enough, exactly as you are. And sometimes the best response to cruelty is patience. Gather your evidence, wait for your moment, and when the time comes, let the truth speak louder than any defense. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated or mistreated by someone who did not know your true worth? What did you do about it? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and your experiences might help others who are going through similar situations. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, make sure you subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Whatever you are facing in your own life, I hope you remember that you have more strength than you realize. Sometimes it just takes the right moment to show it. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Until next time.